And welcome everybody to Traditions Going Vertical podcast. I'm your host, Mike Greenlay. My co-host, as usual, is Eric Hendrickson, president of Tradition Mortgage. And we'd like to, and I love that we can do this now that we've done enough of these, we can welcome back a previous guest, Jacob Smith. He's a managing broker for Sotheby's International. And welcome back, Jacob. Good to see you again. Obviously, there's a lot that has changed. We haven't talked in a little while. So why don't you just give us just a little bit of how the landscape looks right now? I know there's plenty to talk about, and both you and Eric, I'm sure, can kind of break it all down. But just kind of give us a little synopsis on how things are right now.
Thanks so much for having me back, guys. I think last time I sat in this chair, it was about a year ago, and we were talking about new construction, and we were talking about prices of new construction and demand for new construction and everything that was occurring at that time. It's fully where there's a shift taking place in all markets. We're seeing it in multifamily, we're seeing it in new construction, we're seeing it in single family, and I think largely driven clearly by interest rate. Eric, you'll speak to that more than I can. But as the rate started to climb, and it feels like there was, at least in Minnesota, we probably hit peak pricing sometime the end of April. The crystal ball will reveal itself really soon on if that's exactly accurate or not, but we started to see showing activity in mid to late May start to decline. And inventory levels start to grow. We're far from, statistically a balanced market, but it's moving in that direction.
Thank you once again for being with us. Eric, why don't you toss your opening volley out here? I know you've got plenty of insight on what's going on lately.
As Jake mentioned, interest rates are obviously up significantly, but that in and of itself isn't the reason there's this shift in the winds in the real estate market. The reason rates are up is because they're pulled up by inflation. And inflation is creating a lot of havoc out there, and it's impacting people's buying power, and it's impacting people's feeling of wealth, kind of that wealth effect. We've continued to see supply chain disruptions, and we mentioned when Jake was last here, we were talking about new construction, and that's continued to be really dogged by supply chain issues. That has not only made it immensely more expensive to build a home, but just the delivery time periods are exponentially lengthened. Where you could go and buy more of a production price house and you could get into it 120 days, you could often close, maybe 180, so 6 months on the long end. Those are becoming 12 months. So if you're an individual and you want to buy a new house and interest rates have gone from 3% to 6%, and the time period to get your product goes from 4, 5, or 6 months out to 12 or 14, you know what, you're going to say, forget it, I'm not going to do it. And that's where we've seen with our builder partners that we do financing for them. We've been very fortunate that we work with a lot of really high quality companies. They're all facing a slowdown, and the biggest issue, it's cost and it's time period, and then it's the interest rate. And those things just come together to really put a drag on things. And as far as existing homes, there's been such a shortage of supply that now with interest rates going up, people are having a tough time getting a house anyway, and now they're looking at it going, okay, my mortgage payment's going up 20%, 25% because of what's gone on. I'm just going to take a time out. So they just kind of back off, and they just kind of remove themselves from the marketplace, and we see, incoming new applications are down. I mean, we've been fortunate that there's still a stream coming in, but they're down, and I think it's just people are discouraged, and they're looking to wait it out. And all this stuff's kind of come together here in the last probably 2.5-3 months that has really just created this change you can feel.
There's a necessity out there for people who have to move, let's say for job related or something else. How many, or do you have a kind of a feel as to how many people are just like kind of sniffing around the market saying, well, let's see what I could get for my house. I don't want to move, but maybe I will if someone gives me the right number. I mean, was there a lot of that, and has there been, and does that contribute a lot maybe to the drop off now that, you know, things have changed a little bit? Are people just not so curious anymore about what their house is really worth because they know that it's more difficult?
You know, it's a great question. Before I hit on that, of year over year, what do you think? What's the mortgage application? What percentage down are we?
A big part of mortgage applications for us mortgage companies, you know, comes from refinance side of things. So I mean, refinance activity is down over 90%. So, and that typically represents 50% of your overall business. So I mean, you can basically say that's all wiped out. So mortgage companies are down 50% from their annual volume just because of refinances, and then year over year loan applications for purchase money are down probably, you know, it depends on who you ask or what you're looking at. It's probably, I would say, anywhere from 10 to 25% down from what we saw. So I mean, you know, overall you're probably looking at 60%, in some cases 70% reduction in overall loan application volume on our end, which, you know, that's a tough number. So it really, you know, there's a culling of the herd you're seeing. You can just do Google searches on mortgage layoffs and other things, and just these big companies that are more call center based on, you know, refinances and other things, they are just getting decimated. Companies are filing from bankruptcy, shuttering their doors. So, you know, us more grassroots kind of community-based lenders, you know, this is where we can have a chance to really gain market share and thrive, because we're, you know, out there, we're working with real estate professionals like yourself. We're rooted in the community, and we're getting referrals and repeat clients, so you can survive. Nobody's getting rich right now in our business, but, you know, you're keeping the lights on and paying the bills, and more importantly, you're keeping your staff employed, and your originators are still seeing success competing out there in the marketplace.
Thanks for that. That's a significant, and it's always interesting to me on the real estate side to know where the mortgage applications are coming or aren't coming, because it's a direct correlation to the buyers that are calling us and saying, hey, we want to get in the car this weekend and look at places.
Sure.
The trends in the market, you know, in the 23 years I've been in the business, every cycle seem to get a bit exaggerated, of everybody wants to buy at the same time,
Yeah.
and everybody wants to sit on the bench at the same time. And the way this cycle happened and when it hit us, at least for Minnesota style, is kind of a bit of a nasty thunderstorm on the one of, it's really easy to sit on the bench in the summer because your house is quite a bit bigger in the summer. You can get outside, you have activities, you have weekend things planned, and so it's a really easy time of year to go, you know what, I'm out. I'm just going to wait this thing out and see what happens. But come September, when it starts to get cold and you retreat back into your house, you're going to be back in the market. At least a lot of the buyers will.
Yeah.
And so we're confident that we're going to have a good fall. There's still people out there that pick up the phone and call and go, you know what, I don't need this big of a house, or now might be the time to sell. I heard my neighbor got an amazing price for their house. It might be time.
Yeah.
But then those that are well advised, you know, are just making the decision, right? Of, is it right? There's enough data points out there that we don't see that many people just taking a flyer and going, let's just put a crazy number on it and see what happens.
I always like to ask this question because, you know, the old adage is people who don't understand or don't know history are, you know, destined to repeat it, so to speak. But, you know, that can be a good thing too. I mean, if you know your history, especially in your own industry, then you can obviously, you know, you can build off of that. So I guess my question is have you seen historically, and you just mentioned it, that, in the cycle of things going up and down over the course of your experience in this business, how much can you draw on history right now? Because we are in times where it just seems to me that people don't have a direct historical read on exactly how everything's going. Or are you just plucking little bits of history out and saying, well, this makes sense, that makes sense, so that's kind of how we're going to, I guess, project or read things going forward?
The crystal ball at times is clear and at times it's a bit foggy. This is one of those that, a lot of it I draw from people like Eric and from other people that I work with in the industry. And, the question I've had frequently is is it going to be like '08?
Yeah.
In '08, there was a lot of different things occurring that are not occurring today.
Yeah.
In '08, we didn't have the level of inflation that we have right now. In '08, we had a ton of subprime lending that was going on. And we didn't have the same supply challenges that we have now. And so it feels like if there's clearly some price correction that's occurring, but there's a massive amount of equity people have in their homes for the most part. There's still shortage of supply. There's still significant demand, and there's massive inflation that's still occurring. And so we don't see a big correction, but we see some correction.
For those of us like Jake and myself that have been in this business for going on 3 decades, you can see how different 2008 was, and just how there were just structural deficiencies in financing that just created this flood of easy money, and that's not there. I mean, I can tell you this because we look at thousands of applications a year. The consumer that's borrowing in general is very strong, and you look at the U.S. saving rate during the pandemic, it spiked. I mean, it's coming down obviously now with inflation, but it's still historically very strong. So, and unemployment is incredibly low. There's 2 job openings for every one, applicant looking for employment. So that in and of itself is truly amazing. So this is such a bizarre world that we live in right now. It's all these, talks of recession and problems on one side, and on the other side you have just these everybody's just is overall really strong. And again, there's not saying that there aren't people struggling out there, but if you look at it on a macro scale, it's really strong. So that, to me, as it relates to real estate and finance, is you have all these people that are out there that are strong and they're capable, and they've kind of taken time out. So, I mean, timeout is a good thing, depending on how long it goes. If you do have a timeout and it allows supply chains to catch up, and it ratchets expectations of home sellers down a little bit, where they're willing to accept reasonable offers, and it kind of balances out, that could, to me, it kind of sets it up for a little bit of a rally run that could be longer, because then you don't have the inflation issues. You have interest rates are a little bit lower. And people have to remember, when the Fed raises the Fed funds rate, they do that to bring down inflation by slowing down economic activity. They want you to buy less houses and cars and things. They want you to stop. And they say, well, the Fed's going to create a recession. Well, that's the whole point. It's just how much. Obviously the technical term of recession is like a certain percentage of reduction in GDP over a period of time. But at the end of the day, micro or macro, the Fed is saying, everybody just slow down and let's let supply catch up. Let's bring that demand down a little bit. And it's happening. It's, perception is reality. I mean, gasoline is already coming down quite a bit. Mortgage interest rates are back down in the 5s, which sounds weird to say, exciting to, but they're down, 50 plus basis points off their high. Consumer price index out next week. These inflation reports will be looked at very closely, but that stuff, as demand goes down a little bit, things will catch up. So I'm optimistic of what 2023 has in store. Quite frankly, I do think there might be a little bit of a rally there, because you're going to have more reasonable expectations. You're going to have, in my opinion, cheaper interest rates, because home loan rates, they don't wait for the Fed to bump the Fed funds rate to go up. The mortgage rates, like the bond market that are openly traded, they price in future expectations. So they've already priced in 75 basis points going up here in July, and probably another couple of 50-point bumps after that. So this is already reflected. But I think people have to remember the reason the Fed's doing what it's doing is they do want things to slow down. And quite frankly, that's a good thing. And we're just going to have to weather, in my opinion, a little bit of a storm here in the remainder of 2022, and just kind of get through it.
So another way to look at this, and another perspective that we can have on the history of time and what's occurred most recently, is we ran into the pandemic in Europe. It started probably, China, it started in November, December of 2019. We were coming out of 5% interest rate in the fall of that year, and then we rolled into spring. For sure, it hit here in March, and we had a complete shutdown. And coming out of the complete shutdown, we didn't know, right? We were coming to work going, what's going to happen? And thankfully for us, the demand for housing was greater than we've ever seen. The demand for bigger houses, we thought the McMansions were done. We thought you need 2 home offices, a sport court, a gymnasium, a workout room, and a full bar in your basement was over. No, it was just beginning. And so we hit the pandemic. The demand for all of these needs in your house was great. And then to fuel it even more, we filled stimulus in there that drove interest rate down to a point that was so wildly low. And so a lot of what occurred over this long pandemic was a sugar buzz. It was a sugar buzz that was fueled by a need that we had never seen before and a stimulus that we had never seen before. And now that that's over and life is returning more to normal, the need has subsided, and the stimulus for mortgage rates is definitely gone. And so the sugar buzz is gone, and we're looking at this thing going, all right, are we back to fall of 2019? Or are we on the way back to fall of 2019, which was a phenomenal real estate market?
Perspective is so key. People forget, right? It's really easy to get, I call it myopic in their views, where you're just focusing in on 24 months. And if you look at where we're at today compared to 24 months, you're like really bummed out. But like you said, it was a sugar buzz. It was just these crazy global events that are once in more than a lifetime. And if you back up, where were we in 2019? Early in the year 2019, things were going great, to the point where the Federal Reserve had dropped interest rates effectively down to the Fed funds rate down to 0 during the recession, and they never really got the guts to move the rates up. And they were finally talking in 2019 about trying to bump rates. So, and we were, like you're talking about, high 4s, 5%, which is not that far off from where we are today. And then obviously money started flowing into the bond markets in latter 2019, coming over internationally, because COVID was already taking effect, and we couldn't figure out, gosh, these rates are so great. But it was kind of all that money fleeing the burning ship in Europe, and then obviously what went on here, and then the Fed buying billions of dollars of mortgage bonds to drive rates down, just created this crazy environment where you just kind of have to remove that and say, okay, let's broaden the lens, and let's look at the last decade and where rates are at, and you're like, okay, more normalized. We're not really that bad. It's pretty solid, but it's again, coming off that sugar buzz, you get a little bit of a headache there, and you lose your energy. But then, once that clears, things are pretty good. But I think if you back it up, we are not that different really overall than we were in 2019, which again, based with 2019, not knowing what 20 and 21 would have in store, 2019 was like a really, those fundamentals, like we were like, hey, this is about as good as it gets. So again, I think it's about perspective, and I think that's where, you know, professionals like Jake just educating clients of being a little bit more broad in their views. I think that makes people realize there's still great opportunities out there.
You kind of answered the question I was going to ask both of you, but you kind of already covered it, and that is, what are you going to be focusing on, or what are you going to be keeping your eye on in the next 6 months and even beyond? So you kind of covered it from the mortgage side of things. Jacob, what are you going to kind of be maybe focused on a little bit more, or kind of keeping your eye on a little bit more as we go forward here?
I work with a lot of different real estate agents, and we've had a lot of these conversations. And there's still the great thing with residential housing, of the majority of our clients, probably 95% of them, are buying and selling primary residence. And so when people are buying and selling primary residence, it's life that leads you down that path.
Right.
It's the additional kid. It's the kids are fighting like crazy.
Yeah.
We need additional space. It's the kids are out of the house. It's time to downsize. It's we're moving to Arizona. It's those types of things. And so the fundamentals for us really don't change. It's being in front of your clients, staying in touch with them. Inventory makes the job kind of fun, because with inventory comes opportunity, and with inventory comes the call that I can make to a past client and say, it's a really cool house and you got to see it.
Yeah.
And you have an opportunity to be able to go in, you have an opportunity to be able to negotiate some things on the transaction. And so the pace that we were in makes it really hard to maintain relationships and deliver service. And so this pace is actually, it's easier for us to perform. It's just an adjustment.
Once again, I'd like to thank you both. Jacob, thank you for coming by again. The insights are tremendous as usual, and I know that we'll have you back again, because this is something that just, you know, it's a living document, if you will. You know, it's something that we just are always experiencing, and of course, we know very well that mortgage is the very same way. So, thank you both for your time, and thank you for joining us on our Tradition Going Vertical podcast.
Thanks for
Have a
coming.
great one. Thanks, guys.